since they wiped out the Knicks, man, I just have bad.
That was a heck of a series, though.
It was.
That was a heck of a series.
I know.
Stars got so much heart.
That's true. Ooh, John Stark.
You know, for me, the game is one of those areas of intensity because of the economic possibility that's allowed in this society. So in terms of major media, you see pure, true energy in rhythm and creativity. There's a drag that is not in other areas in terms of being exposed, but it's one area where you do get naturally high.
Where are you staying here?
We're at the office, right? Yeah, the tower. Okay. We watch the game right at the top.
All right.
Yeah. You coming to the game tomorrow? You gonna try, or are you working tomorrow?
No, that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, wish you would if you could.
I'll call you tomorrow. No.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be playing with you there? David Murray and I mean, but who's the backup? Who's the rhythm section?
You do what? I'm the whole rhythm.
You're the rhythm section. You are the rhythm section. Okay.
But we do it a lot. I mean, we don't do it that much in the States. But I mean, the duet's been hit in Europe, you know, for some years.
Right, and that is the work of Mr. Kahil El Zabar, and that comes out of a CD that is entitled Another Kind of Groove, and the composition was The Return of the Lost Tribe. And out of Chicago, just rubbing it in this evening, folks.
Rubbing it and rubbing it. The buzz, the double.
Yeah, well, I want to just, you know, welcome you here to Stolen Moments, and even though you are from Chicago, I do appreciate your being here.
Oh,
we're going to talk about music this evening, and I do appreciate you, you know, coming on out. There's an event taking place tomorrow at the Time Cafe. Actually, it's the Fez, which is under the Time Cafe, and you're going to be playing along with
the renowned master saxophonist, Brother David Murray.
That's right. Really innovative. Gentlemen, but you are creative and innovative and in your own right, and I want to talk a little about that because you're a percussionist, and I started off playing percussion and really enjoyed that, but you know, there was no competition, so I want to give this all to you. But I mean, in terms of being a jazz educator, you come out of, I think you're teaching now at the University of Nebraska, is that correct?
University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska. Right, and I'm a part-time
with the university.
Yeah, teacher there.
Well, I mean, I just want to talk about the ascent from playing drums and being interested in percussion and polyrhythms to education and to, you know, the whole spectrum to playing, all of that.
Well, you know, the key to attainment in terms of knowledge is through learning, and the process of gaining that is through education. With our children of all ages, from K through 8 through high school, through the university level, as well as in the communities, this is an area where it is vital for us to be conduits to the beauty of this music, the history of this music, the value of what is considered a truly original art form to come out of America.
That's right. It's indigenous.
I have been, I guess, teaching for years. There's an organization where many of my peers now live in New York, but people like Leroy Jenkins, Richard Abrams, Chico Freeman, members of the Art Ensemble of Chicago like Lester Bowie and Joseph Jarman, who live in New York, Fred Hopkins, Henry Threadgill. I was chairman of that organization, the AACM, Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, and I took over the chairmanship after Richard Abrams moved to New York. And, you know, I mean, the whole key with the AACM had always been bringing the music to the people. I mean, developing concerts in the community, There was always a free inner city school where we taught instruments, and actually people like myself, Chico Freeman, trombonist George Lewis. Right. I saw on a flyer today at the Firewall Festival, Douglas Ewart was on this festival. Steve Colson and his wife Equa Colson that are here now, we all came out of that as teenagers and into the music in the 60s. So education has been important. It's important as well in the institutions of higher learning in terms of academia. And so now I guess I find my role in those kinds of institutions as an active educator, as well as working with various organizations to speak about the importance and work toward developing those vehicles that allow our communities. It's like this, Brother Mahmoud. If you in Stockholm, Sweden, where I've done workshops, or Helsinki, Finland, or in Metz in France, because most of us work in Europe more than we do in the States, right. And you talk to young children in grammar school or young adults in high school or adults at the university level, and if you ask them about Mahalia Jackson or Erskine Hawkins,
they're absolutely familiar.
They're absolutely familiar. They're up on it. But the thing is that their communities, which are not American communities, have realized the value in terms of the contribution of predominantly the African American personality in terms of creativity, especially in the area of the music, and how they have expanded the consciousness of the world, and therefore they have taken a responsibility to put those things within their institutions so that their young people can benefit from this great history, this great knowledge, and of course, number one, this great music. So I find myself hopefully being a spokesperson and a conduit toward young people in my society and in my community to deal with the issue that this art is valuable. This art is important towards spirituality, towards history, towards health, toward bringing people together in a social environment. It's utility. And a lot of times that gets missed because of the exoticism with what is so-called jazz. But more than that exoticism, it's the utility of the art, that people have used this in a beneficial way through every decade in the 20th century, and will be using it on to the 21st century.
Right. How do you account for the lack of knowledge and interest in jazz that young African Americans have with respect to vis-a-vis rhythm and blues and other kinds of popular art forms?
Well, you have to have vehicles within your communities in order to be exposed. And if you look at it historically, going from the 50s to the 60s, in most cities there were a lot of zoning laws. Like in Chicago, there were a lot of spots in the south side and the west side of Chicago. In New York, a lot of spots in Harlem. Spots in the Bronx.
Where there were venues for jazz.
Right. In New Jersey, in Newark, there were spots. In Philadelphia, there were many places in the black community. With the zoning laws, as they changed, well then, those places where the music was being performed in what we knew as jam sessions, what we knew as performance. I mean, when I first, on the south side of Chicago, where I grew up, I grew up 3 blocks from where Herbie Hancock grew up. And then 6 blocks over was Jack DeJohnette. And then Muhal lived about 8 blocks over. And then every night I could go to more than 20 clubs without even paying, because you didn't pay, because all the clubs on 63rd Street, on 47th Street, on 35th Street, and on 39th Street, clubs in Chicago that were known like the Macombo, the Pershing, where Ahmad Jamal did 2 famous records. Places where Andrew Hill, who grew up in Chicago, because Malachi, who played on that last piece with me, played with Andrew's first group. So you go to all these places. Jack was learning how to play drums at the same time being a piano player. The AACM, before it became an official organization, musicians like Jenkins and Muhal and Fred Anderson, great tenor player in Chicago, were getting together. Eddie Harris was living in Chicago. Junior Mance, piano player, was in Chicago. So you had all of this going on. So me, at 14, 15, 16, I saw Train at 16. I saw Monk at 17, 18 years old. Same in New York, same in Philly, same in Watts, same in Kansas City. So by the 50s and the 60s, the zoning laws, well then those black club owners and club managers did not have the vehicles, and it moved to white parts of the communities. They started becoming the major patrons also you had the academicians being predominantly white and creating the curriculums as well as the itinerary of what will be studied
and the critique.
how it will be studied.
Right.
It's just like there's no school board that has initiated one Duke Ellington book in the whole country. So how do you have a young African American child be exposed to that? Then when each period when there was innovation in the music, the critics as well as those who controlled the media didn't understand the point of what it came from. So when bebop came from swing, the critics did not understand that next direction because they didn't understand the social environment within the ethnicity of its experience. So when Bird and Monk and Fats Navarre took this direction, the critics said it's not happening. Well, at that point, in the early into the middle 40s, jazz was the most popular music in America. All of a sudden, because those who didn't understand the direction decided it will not be written about in that period, it will not be on the radio. Then you have the next period, 50s and the 60s, and what was called the so-called dawning of the avant-garde and the so-called nationalist music and the movement. Once again, many critics knocked the music, less and less radio play. So then when you look from the 50s, 60s, 70s to the 80s, there is no exposure for young people in terms of media. Whereas in Paris, you have a radio station called Radio Nova. They may play X-Clan rap group. Then after that, they may play Gilberto Gil or Milton Nascimento from Brazil. Then after that, they may play Isaac Perlman or Vladimir Horowitz. And then after that, they might play Bird. And after that, Kool Moe Dee. And then Bon Jovi. So then the democracy of exposure to someone 14, 15 is so great on their psyche at a time when they're impressionable. They have a lot more to absorb in terms of their palate. And then we look at the American public that is basically castricized through democracy of exposure. And by not having that exposure, it ain't happening. And until our children get that, they won't. And we haven't taken the responsibility as a community to understand our role to be responsible to advancing our culture.
One of the things that Betty Carter says with respect to the avant-garde movement particularly is that that jazz to her had always been a music that people could dance to, could sit back and listen to, and when the avant-garde exposure came in, people could no longer find the rhythm and find the beat and got lost.
Right, but we have to, yeah. And so
and her position was that although musicians improved themselves technically, that in doing that they lost an audience.
Okay, you know, when Betty had really developed her skills in terms of just this incredible vocal oratory or improvisation with voice that she does, after the whole periods with Hamp and Ray Charles and all that, she was a part of the hard bop movement. And at that period, that was avant-garde.
That was avant-garde. And that's what people were saying they didn't understand.
Okay. But how can you not understand?
She's talking about the avant-garde movement of the 60s.
Yeah, I know. But see, the thing is, that's why I always deal with history. When you deal with hard bop, you deal with the music of Art Blakey, Horace Silver. It's dealing in time structures that are considered very rhythmical. This is music from bebop to hard bop that Train grew up in. And when you listen to a Love Supreme or many of the compositions, no matter if there are harmonic and melodic extensions, the bottom of the groove between Jimmy Garrison and Elvin is there. And when you listen to Sun Ra and used to see June Tyson sing and dance, you understood that the time was there. When we were young people and on the radio, one of the popular songs on R&B stations was "A Creator Was a Master Plan." But you'll never have that today. That kind of music be popular with young people. And the thing is that it wasn't as much, I think, that the avant-garde, now, there were many things that got atonal and non-rhythmic in terms of structure. But the majority of the music came from the pulse of a community that had always been rhythmic. We advanced. See, what we were doing in the 60s was 7/4 time, 5/8 time, 11/4 time. And choreographers like Diane McIntyre could dance to it. Okay? And there was, when we did the Lindy Hop and bop, in the 40s and 50s in advanced improvisation with dance, that same relationship would have happened in terms of what is so-called avant-garde music if it was not separated in terms of its participation with the community, because at the time of the so-called nationalist movement, we were moving toward African dance. We were moving toward certain understandings of using color, of garb, feeling, attitude. That power was so contrary to American Western conservatism you can see real attempts to somewhat destroy the kind of celebration that happened with the energy of that time. Dance was very much a part of the music of Randy Weston, of Pharoah Sanders, of the Art Ensemble of Chicago. I can dance to all of it. I still do hip-hop dance. Do you understand? So it's more of the thing of being disconnected to our ability to create and be improvisers. Because when we look at music today, there is not a lot of improvisation in terms of popular music. Whereas when you went and saw a Jimi Hendrix concert, a Marvin Gaye concert, a Tina Turner, Ike Turner concert, a Art Ensemble, every area of music, there was improvisation. Today, like I took my daughters and some friends, and I was really upset because I paid $27 a ticket to see some rappers, and they were actually lip syncing. So I'm thinking, I'm paying $27, whereas if they had been at the Regal Theater in Chicago, and you saw the Temptations, or you saw Major Land, so
real, it was on the spot.
Yeah, and it was not the same as the record. You never saw Smokey Robinson. You never saw Ramsey Lewis and his trio with the in crowd. You never saw Lee Morgan. In any area, you never saw the Mighty Clouds of Joy, the Golden Gate Quartet, which was a famous gospel group, 50s. You never saw anybody redo anything. The creativity of Adam Clayton Powell's speech, Malcolm's speech, whatever, man. Every area of life. Every area of life.
That's part of our culture. We're speaking with Kahil El Zabar, who's a percussionist and, as you can tell, an educator and a historian in this indigenous music that we call jazz. And we're here over Stolen Moments. Kahil will be appearing tomorrow night, I believe, over at the Fez, which is just under the Time Cafe, which is located at 380 Lafayette Street. And he's appearing with David Murray, which will be a very exciting concert. You do a lot of composing, I noticed in your CDs. Is there an area that you enjoy better than others? I mean, do you enjoy being in front of the audience, or the composition, or in what area do you?
I enjoy all of it. I enjoy first for myself the experience of creation when I have those really moments of inspiration. I mean, inspiration is not just an ongoing, ever-flowing thing.
Yeah, it comes in drifts.
It comes in drifts. But when that moment happens in my life, I am most thankful to the Creator for the breath that comes through me. And then secondly, I enjoy it when I see it in someone else. I don't have to just be on the stage. If I, see Pharoah, and I mean, it's like I used to do a thing when I was young. I never, did drugs. That was not my kind of thing. But in Chicago, some folks used to think that I did because I used to hyperventilate.
So much energy.
I mean, the music. I remember once seeing Rasan Roland Kirk. And you play these 2 or 3 horns. I mean, at one time
the
he
trisexual.
could play, oh, my brother, oh. And once, I took a girlfriend who I think after this concert she never spoke to me again because when Rasan played these 3 horns and he started shaking this chair and the intensity got to a point, I just fell out in the place, and she I think left me there and I never saw her again, right? But that experience of creation, I mean, when you see, Michael Jordan in this game and you see that that's inspiration.
There's a level of excellence that you strive for, and it's just incredible.
It almost becomes non-physical, even though it's through the physical experience. And the music used to have that reverberation every day in our lives. I mean, every day that was going on. I mean, you could be so outside yourself on a spiritual level, and at the same time very organic in day-to-day life, just everywhere around you. And that for me is the most wonderful feeling, watching my children grow and seeing whatever creative things, because that's the juice of life, creativity. If we're not creative, no life goes on. And as powerful as it is, it seems in this world today, mediocrity dominates, and many who are gifted with the creativity are intimidated to express it fully because of all the mediocrity.
For being seen as the fool. That's right. That's right, for expressing. Among the many things that you do, you've also gotten involved in the film industry. And I want to talk a little about that, but let's talk about the films that you have worked on and worked with. Your last project was?
The last project was a film that did, I think, about a month or more run here in New York. It was all over the country. Independent black film that was done in Chicago by a young filmmaker by the name of Daryl Roberts, and the film was called How You Like Me Now.
Right.
And Darnell Williams, who was on All My Children, was one of the stars, and Charnel Brown from A Different World, she was another, and then Sally Richardson was a co-star who is now in Posse, the young woman in Posse. And I scored that film, you know, did all the music for that. And then another film.
It was a feature.
It was a feature film.
Right.
It's going to be distributed on video by Universal, and it will also be on HBO. And then the other film that I did last year, scoring all the scene music, and I also had a cameo role in the film, and that was Mo Money with Damon Wayans, and I was the drummer that was in the subway during the murder.
Okay. All right.
And
what kind of challenges does scoring a film present that composing for a chamber setting,
right,
that it doesn't exist there? I mean,
well,
what are the different kinds
with
of
the
challenges?
film, you have limited vignettes that you have to get from one point to another point real quickly, and you have to be able to modify your idea and still be effective. In the live or the regular composing arena, you have more freedom to let that idea come to its own conclusion.
That's right.
Whereas with this element is the element of control in terms of creativity to certain points, and then it's also relating that to technology. You know, it's like when I do a film, I have to put the film on, they put the film on videotape for me, and then it's hooked up to a computer, and then it's on what's called SMPTE tape, so that every little millimeter is on time. And so then I've got everything I've synthesized in terms of composed that will eventually go to live instruments, and I've got to bring that down to every little nth second and millimeter of time to make sure it fits the drama, the emotion, and then it's the collaboration process in terms of your idea. When you're composing, you're given a work, you have an objective, and you go and you meet it. With the film, you have to deal with the director, you have to sometimes deal with the writer, you have to deal with the producers, and so in certain ways there are limitations, but if you can find some real inspiration, and the LA Times did a review of the film and of How You Like Me Now, and I did the opening with a double string quartet, and they said it was some of the most original writing that they had heard, which made me very proud. So I was limited in the amount of time and the concept of what I had to do, but I was unlimited in my ability to get across the point I wanted to get to. And so that paradox creates a real inner kind of drive
conflict.
To see it.
Well, is it conflicting? I mean, I would imagine that
it's more of a tension than a conflict, because you can work it out. You know, inevitably you get to the point, but what seemingly is a conflict in the beginning, you get past that inertia, that tension, and you get to whatever your groove or what you're trying to do if you're a successful scorer. You know, and that's something that I want to do more. For one, different concepts about organizing music, and that's what composition is. It's organizing music.
In its simplest terms.
In its simplest terms. And there are many voices. I mean, especially with my peers. I mean, my peers are some of the greatest composers living today. I mean, Henry Threadgill is one of the greatest composers living today. James Newton's great composer. David Murray's great composer. You know, and to have opportunities, be it in symphonic works and film scores, in suites, major suites, and having these opportunities. If that doesn't happen for us, this society and our communities are missing a tremendous opportunity to see artists at their peak in terms of their skills and their creative drive.
We are going to listen to another piece. I believe this is one of your compositions as well.
No, it's a tribute to Miles.
Oh, that's
Davis.
right. I'm sorry. This is all blues.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
and,
that's Miles. That's right.
It's a unique arrangement with me playing an instrument called the kalimba, which is African thumb piano, and David Murray on
That was
tenor.
actually popular. I mean, 20 years ago, there was a lot of African thumb piano out. You don't hear much of it now. Is there a reason for that, do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Actually, Maurice White and I had the same teacher, and it was a gentleman by the name of Phil Charwren, who was one of the founding members of the AACM. And so, you know, Maurice really helped to expose that particular instrument, being an indigenous African instrument, and for a while, a few people messed around with it.
Yeah, because I think after Earth, Wind, and Fire, I began to see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
I mean, in jazz, in the jazz context,
Sure.
and I did.
You know, Stanley Cowell,
Right.
who's a wonderful pianist and composer,
Mm-hmm.
did some things with it, but you know, I went ahead and pursued it for like 20 years. You know, I mean, one thing I've tried to do with my music, I play various kinds of
Yeah, and let's
pianos.
talk about all. Let's talk about all the instruments that
Okay.
you do play, because we don't want to limit you to drums particularly.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about all the.
Okay.
What are the instruments that you play?
Well, I mean, I play various African thumb pianos. I play the Mbira, which is from the Shona people in East Africa. I play the kalimba, which is from South Africa. I play the sanza, which is West African thumb piano. And then I play, you know, traditional trap drums.
Traps, right?
I play congas, African drums, the Nigerian ashiko drum, and a drum that I made, taught by my teacher, whose name is Harold Atukwe Murray, lives in Atlanta, called the African Earth Drum. And it was a drum that was first brought by Chief Bey here in New York, a great patriarch of the Afrocentric community.
Right.
And it's taking the barrel, pickle barrel, wine barrel, and making it over, because that's all slaves had to work with. And so I play that, and it's really a traditional African-American style of African drumming. And I am one of the few components of that particular instrument. You know, and then I play marimbas, I play flute.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you playing the flute a little while ago.
Yeah, you know, so
you're gonna be doing that tomorrow night with David Murray, am I right? Is that, or is that was that the public relations people?
Yeah, that's probably him. Yeah, because I'm playing variety percussion instruments,
Right.
and I let him handle the
weight.
melodic,
Yeah.
melodic thing. And you know, as you know,
Yeah, he can handle it.
he can more than handle it.
Okay, so we're going to listen to All Blues, and this again is Kahil El Zabar, who will be down at the Time Cafe tomorrow evening, and we'll be back with him in just a bit. He's coming through, right? And that is the work of Mr. Kahil El Zabar, and who's my very special guest here on Stolen Moments this evening. We were off mic talking about the way in which we can sustain some of these institutions of community participation with such. So let's just get into that just a bit. How do you feel about, do you think that there's a lack of community participation in advancing jazz?
Yes. There's an alienation to resources, which is one of the causes, but there also one of the great causes is a lack of responsibility to take the successful initiatives to achieve the end result of having the music once again embraced, participated, and created within the community. Of course, when there's a void, it's natural that there's going to be despondency. There's going to be despair. And then we can do about it. Blah, 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 blah. We can't have that happen. There's so many areas. I mean, in terms of cable television, for one. Taking the initiatives like what I'm experiencing with the station today.
Yeah, by the way, I do want to say that this particular program is being videotaped. So we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah. But those are the kinds of responsibilities that we have to take nationwide. At this point, we have not come up with a creative alternative in terms of networking the cable systems, be it Atlanta, Chicago, New York, so that if there are programs that we could transmit of the work of Max Roach or whatever, or some speaker, or Karinga, or Haki Malabudi, or whatever, not just the music, because it's holistic, I believe. But in terms of the area, what I focus on, in terms of what my contribution is, this art form, creative music, cable's one area. The work that you are doing, which I can tell from this moment is a sense of dedication from you, Brother Mahmoud, that has to go on more. It can't only be the few who take the responsibility to be the educators, the documentarians, the historians, the communities, those folks that are home listening, realize that they really take a part, that their voice, when they take their voice and make it heard, has impact. There is a lack of democracy in terms of where funding goes from national and private agencies in terms of the communities, the demographic makeup, making the arguments toward that, not being afraid to take events in Harlem, not being afraid to take events on the west side of Chicago, not being afraid to take events in Atlanta or in Philadelphia. And the work of Odine Pope in Philadelphia, who plays with Max Roach, he's been consistent there. Horace Tapscott in California, in L.A. Horace Tapscott has been consistent. You wouldn't have Arthur Blythe or David Murray's if it hadn't been for Horace Tapscott. People like Phil Coran in Chicago. You wouldn't have Earth, Wind, and Fire if it hadn't been for Phil Coran, because he taught Maurice White the kalimba. You know, you wouldn't have Winton's if there wasn't his father or Brother Baptiste in New Orleans. So in all the cities, what you have is a despondency to take the kinds of initiatives that are there. And when the community realizes that I can create my own events, that I can actually speak to some of the artists, and maybe some of the artists won't be receptive because they've been burned many times and they feel that the community has not supported them. But artists like myself, or like Craig Harris, or Odine Pope, and many other artists who take that responsibility to be involved in the community and have created events ourselves, we have to have those ongoing relationships. Then there are the technical skills. I get tired of the brother or sister, or the gentleman, young woman who is the graphic artist at some advertising firm who loved the music in the 60s or the 70s and is making the $70,000 a year, and will come to the event in the hood wearing the same tam, dashiki, or gele that they wore to say they're in the movement, but yet the skills that they have gained at the advertising company they're not bringing to the community. Or that person who's in grantsmanship or work, they're not taking those skills and bringing it to the community, and therefore using the energy that's always been in the grassroots, but now taking it from the 60s of just the raw grassroots movement that I'm a part of, but dealing with technology and information, and then therefore the networking that allows the constructive initiative toward the success of institutionalizing a flourishing 21st century cultural vision. That's the next step.
So yeah, so in hand with that is the managerial skills that we discussed.
And the managerial skills.
And working that through. Yeah, that has been problematic. As I said, again off mic, that I was involved with a book fair that happened in Harlem, and we were trying to reach out to different musicians in different circumstances, and really had problems with funding, and had problems with musicians understanding the problems of funding. And again, and your comments are apropos that perhaps we do need to hone up on some managerial skills and access the venues that are out there that would support us.
See, it's like this, if I give this little small little antidote. In the 50s to the 60s, we were limited in terms of gaining certain information in the process of education in those institutions. Fed up because there were rights that we had that were being neglected. An intensity arose with a focused purpose. And by that focused purpose, through whatever, protests, riots, whatever, those in power felt a need to negotiate. Okay?
That's right. Which means
now,
we had to give up something.
This ain't the 60s. What we have to do now is go to the funding agencies and go to the banks and say, we want the investment dollars. We want the grant. And not be so diplomatic to the point of despondency because you can't create the energy that pushes things forward. And so if you only have one person going to the First National Bank saying, well, I want this $20,000 because I think this thing I'm going to do with this record company or this book publishing company or this t-shirt company or whatever, well, the bank can say no. But when there's 20,000 saying, I want that $20,000, well, then the bank vice presidents have to get together, and then they got to get the permission from the president and say, well, we got to do some negotiation and some compromises here because the intensity is getting to the point that we have to deal with it. We nationwide are not making the arguments, and we, in terms of the agendas, have forgotten the importance of culture. Adam Clayton Powell knew it. That's why he started the first Jazz Ambassadors series with Dizzy and Quincy Jones, who went around the world. We've forgotten that culture, along with education and economics and social welfare is an essential part of advancing the community. And so our communities have forgotten to take that responsibility. And jazz is one of the pitfalls of that neglect. Now, once we bring that into focus and say that this is essential to our life, this is utility. It's not just, as I said earlier, some esoteric experience.
And aesthetics.
You cannot live without culture because it transmits the meaning of life. And so if this music has done that, this music will do that. And if we don't do it, we won't have it, and there's a part of life within us missing. And that's pretty much what's going on right now. There's a groove in the communities that's missing. There's a sense of intelligence that's missing. Because when we look at this music, and when you look at Miles and Duke and Erskine Hawkins and Jimmy Lunsford, Count Basie, Train, there was an elegance through rhythmic intelligence and a confluence that came from that. And if we don't put that on our children, there will be a limited essence that they will not project. And when you look across the community, even though there's an energy and certain things happening, that certain rhythmic elegance is missing. And when you have that, it's reflected in your whole persona. And so now, you have a small group of individuals that express that with real strength and depth. And we see the first elder generation all passing into life, dying. So if we don't take responsibility, be it a David Murray or a Winton or John Faddis or an Edward Wilkerson who plays in the ethnic heritage ensemble, to give them their rightful exposure. It's their rightful exposure based on the work that they have done and the value of the depth of their expression. Our children will miss it, and it won't come again.
Two of those spokesmen that live in New York City and hang around New York City, John Lewis and certainly Max Roach.
Oh,
just incredible,
without a doubt,
intense individuals. Let's talk right now about the Ethnic Heritage Ensemble, and I understand that there's a particular deal that's been made and some birth that will happen in August. Want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, for Joe Bowie, the trombonist who plays a lot here in New York with D-Funk, who is a member of the Ethnic Heritage Ensemble, and Edward Wilkerson, who I think played here, I think last month with 8 Bold Souls, and myself, we make up the Ethnic Heritage Ensemble, which is a group that came out of the AACM. It's a group that's been together for 20 years, and we had done a lot of European label recordings, but we never, and I personally, you know, out of my recordings with various groups, this is my first American deal, and it's with the Chameleon label, which is under Warner Brothers distribution, and it's a 5-record deal. It is a major,
that's incredible,
record deal, and the first release, which is called Dance with the Ancestors, will come out in August, and I will be back in New York for a big record party. They're doing record parties in New York, Chicago. They're doing a video. I mean, stuff that just doesn't go on with this music.
That's true. That's true.
You know, we've got support. The company's behind us. I'm very thankful and very excited. And I think we did a good job with this first recording. We got time. It wasn't, you know, a record deal where you do it real quick and, you know, I mean, it was done the way it should be done. And it will, you know, come out August. And another thing, Third World Press, that publishes Gwen Brooks and Ruby Dee and Frances Cress Wells and Chancellor Williams, is also publishing my first book that comes out the 1st of August as well, which is called Mistaken Brilliance. And it's a volume of essays and poems. And I do a piece which is called Afrocentrics, an assessment of African-American culture within the diaspora.
Is that something that you always wanted to do? I mean, poetry and writing?
Yeah, well, you know, I've written, you know, for over 20 years, and, you know, always did readings, and Oliver Lake and myself are two, you know, musicians that do a lot of writing in terms of poetry, and in the Midwest, you know, I've been known for years for that, and then Haki, who is a dear friend and prolific writer, said, well, it's time for you to put this book out. And in terms of the music, recently we haven't had that many from the field. I mean, there are critics, there are historians, there are academicians, but I live the music. And so that voice, I think, is important to express in writing. You know, and I speak a little bit about the history of, you know, what's going on. I speak a little bit about film in terms of the essay, and the poems are from things about the music, things about love, family, you know, women, children, and, you know, some political, philosophical things.
Good. I do want to just mention again that you can find Kahil. I'm sure that most of the listening audience, if not all of the listening audience, has enjoyed this education this evening, because this is important. I mean, to bring educators on who are intimate with the music, who understand the vision that the music holds, and it's important. It's important to hear that, and it's important for that to be articulated and expressed. And I do appreciate your being here and sharing that.
Thank you, Brother Mahmoud, as well.
But I want to just say again that Kahil can be found tomorrow evening along with David Murray at right under the Time Cafe, which is located at 380 Lafayette Street. And the phone number for that particular information is 533-3000. That's 533-3000. And for jazz information in New York generally, there's the American Music Project, and that number is 242-5992. That's 242-5992 for the American Music Project. And you can always get a hold of Kahil through the American Music Project. Am I right?
Yes.
So we look forward to seeing you, and I'll see you tomorrow night.
Oh, great, man! I look forward to coming out.
WBAIers there tomorrow evening at the Time Cafe. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And this is Stolen Moments, and we're going to listen to this final piece that I have here, and I believe this is from The Ritual. Is that it?
Yes, The Ritual, and
this is The Day of the Celestials. Am I right?
Right, and it is the last composition of Raphael Donald Garrett, who played with John Coltrane and many other, you know, great musicians, and he has been deceased for a few years now. This was his last recording.
All right. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow evening. And for you, just enjoy this for a bit, and I'll be back in a bit.
Last recording.